Hi, Mark Donovan here from Falcon Imagery, and today I'm going to go over the 6 top subject areas that students struggle with on check rides and that often lead to check ride failures. But before I get into it, consider hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel so you get notified when I come out with my next video. Okay, let's get into it. The top 6 topic areas that lead to check ride failures. Aircraft logbooks and the pilot operating handbook. One of the big areas where students stumble right from the get-go is their inability to effectively communicate if the aircraft that they want the DP to fly with them in is airworthy. First, should have in your possession for the check ride the required pilot operating handbook from the aircraft. Second, you want to have the logbooks for the aircraft. You want to have the airframe, the engine, the prop logbooks, and any airworthiness directives. And you're going to want to show the examiner that all inspections are current, including the ELT, the transponder, the pitot-static, the annuals, the 100-hour inspections, etc. Where that typically leads is to a discussion early on in the check ride where the DP asks, hey, we have some piece of inoperable equipment in the aircraft. And the DP is going to ask you, hey, something's not working, can we fly or not? He'll want to know, or she'll want to know, whether or not we can still fly and how you arrived at your decision. Simple answer of 8 tomato flames and flaps usually isn't going to be sufficient. So you want to make sure you fully understand and are prepared to discuss what minimum equipment lists are and whether or not there's one for your aircraft. Very doubtful. The type certificate data sheet associated with the aircraft. The civil air regulations for airplanes. Kinds of operation equipment list. Your aircraft may not have it. Many older planes do not have a kinds of operation equipment list. The pilot operating handbook, required equipment list in weight and balance chapter. There's usually a whole section in there that will indicate what is needed in the aircraft for equipment. And then, of course, 91-205, 8 tomato flames and flaps and or grab card. So you're going to want to be able to talk through these items, particularly the ones that you're saying are relevant to why we can or can't fly for the particular failure or inoperable equipment that the examiner has given you. And then lastly, how do we deal with inoperable equipment like 91.213, how we're going to placard it, who's going to placard it, if we can still fly. Weather's another major area where students stumble during check rides. Weather-related areas that can lead to check ride failures include not obtaining a legal weather briefing through 1-800-WXBrief.com, whether it be via phone call or using the website, not able to read aviationweather.gov charts, and not knowing what to even look for on aviationweather.gov for charts to assess whether or not it makes sense to fly on your check ride today. Key charts to look at on aviationweather.gov are surface analysis charts, prog charts, wind charts, freezing level charts. Make sure you can read and understand everything on those types of charts. Also, unable to read a coded METAR TAF or PIREP. It's important that you can read the coded messages. They're still required by the FAA. Just reading an unencoded version is not going to be good enough. And lastly, you've got to know the minimum in terms of visibility and ceilings for VFR, marginal VFR, IFR, and low IFR conditions. Systems. This is a huge area for failed check rides. Not knowing details of each system in an aircraft while conducting the check ride can very often lead to failure. You must be able to talk intelligently on the aircraft's engine, both the model and overall functionality, as well as its prop type, size, and pitch. For example, Lycoming 0320 160 horsepower engine, not enough just to give the model number. You know, I got to need to know that it's a 4-cylinder, horizontally posed, naturally aspirated, direct drive engine. Landing gear with types of brake system, for example, hydraulic brake system. Flight controls, the ailerons, the rudders, the stabilator, flaps, and trims and systems. You need to know how these all operate, what axis they move the plane in, etc. So make sure you're very comfortable with explaining the flight controls of the aircraft. Engine controls, mixture, throttle, and in some cases, prop control. Make sure you're able to explain all of them and what they do. Fuel system, make sure you can explain the life of a fuel drop from when it's in the tank till it gets into the actual cylinder. Continue on systems, the instrument panel. Make sure you know all of your flight instruments in the aircraft and how they can fail. The electrical system, make sure you can discuss the alternator generator in terms of its output, in terms of voltage and current, as well as the battery size that's in the aircraft. Engine-driven vacuum pump system. If your aircraft has it, then what instruments are run on it? What does it mean? If we get an alternator and battery failure, our engine-driven vacuum pump system still going to run? If your aircraft doesn't have an engine-driven vacuum pump, then what is being used to produce the attitude indicator function and the directional gyro? And of those instruments, how are they somehow being backed up? E.g., for example, a backup battery system with those units themselves to basically emulate the original vacuum-driven pumps in the aircraft. So make sure if you're using like Garmin G5s, you know what type of battery life that they have on them in the event you lose the alternator and the battery in the aircraft. The pitot-static system. Where is the pitot tube and static port on your aircraft? Make sure you know where it is and what they do. What instruments do they control? This little picture here with the two G5s, that pitot-static system is controlling not just or providing information, not just to your altimeter, your vertical speed, and your airspeed indicator, but it's also providing information to your Garmin G5s. Heating and ventilation system. Understand if your plane has heat or defrost capability or fresh air vents and where they are. Carburetor heat system. If your aircraft is got a carburetor versus a fuel injector based fuel system, know how it operates, where the intake is for the carburetor heat inside the engine cowling versus the fresh air, and just overall how carburetor icing can affect the aircraft. Next major area where people fail is on the cross-country flight planning. They use improper, incomplete cross-country flight plan package. And what is a package? It should consist of a weight and balance calculation sheet, a nav log, paper or electronic flight bag, such as through ForeFlight, takeoff and landing performance calculations done, confirmed you can take off and land at the airports that you're going to and land at, and IACOA flight plan filled out. So you know, the DP knows that you've got the right type of information in that flight plan to actually file with flight service. Other area where people fail is they've done no proper legal weather briefing. Okay, what altitudes do they expect to fly at relative to the magnetic course that they anticipate flying? 0 to 179, you're going to fly for VFR. You're going to fly odd plus 500. 180 to 359, you can fly even altitudes plus 500. If an EFB is being used, you need to have a complete understanding of that navlog data that comes out of that EFB report in terms of what the wind component factors are, the magnetic variation, and the compass deviation, and how they affect going from a true course heading to the ultimate magnetic course heading that the aircraft's going to fly. Also, need to have top of climb and checkpoints labeled on sectional chart, whether it be on the paper chart or on your ForeFlight, and you need to have calculated the time, distance, and fuel for each one of those legs of the trip. And lastly, the takeoff and landing performance of the aircraft, and to confirm you can safely take off and land at those airports and meet your personal minimums that you've set for yourself and that you may wind up communicating to the DP. And the next area is airspace. So make sure you're well versed in all areas on the VFR sectional chart or low and route charts for IFR students. Key areas to review and confirm that you can properly identify would be types of airspace, Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, and Echo, the minimum ceilings and visibility for each airspace type, prohibited and restricted areas, ADIZ, air defense zone, warning areas, TERSAs, and CIFRAs and freeze zones. Make sure you're very well versed with those last two items in there. They often come up, even if you're not flying in those general areas where you live, they will come up on the Checkride. You'll be asked questions about them. And of course, VFR legends, make sure you've looked at the bottom and side of the chart to know where information is relative to contact information in the types of special use airspace. So those are the key subject areas where I often see students fail Checkrides. When it comes to weather, there's no excuse. Make the calls to 1-800-WXBrief.com or get well-versed in being able to get a legal report from them on their website and being able to use aviationweather.gov. Don't rely just on looking on a METAR or looking at your ForeFlight and think that's sufficient enough, especially if you can't figure out how to get a formal weather briefing on ForeFlight and just, again, relying on a METAR or TAF. Second of all, make sure you fully read the POH and completely understand everything in that pilot operating handbook, particularly as it relates to the systems and the weight and balance and the required equipment list. Third, make sure you have a very solid handle on the airspace. You can read VFR sectional charts thoroughly, you understand the legends and how to read them, and you understand all the airspace minimum in regards to ceilings and visibility. Anyways, I hope you found this video useful. If you did, consider hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel so you get notified on my next video.